Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another live Bald Explorer Didgeridoo with me, Richard Flibbity Flu. Hello, welcome to the live stream. Are we on time? We're sort of on time, aren't we? We're sort of on time. Got back from filming, went out to film a Tram 53. Brighton Tram 53, which will be the video tomorrow. It's all edited and ready to go. That'll be live on the Bald Explorer page tomorrow. However, I got back and this was waiting for me. So I don't know who sent this, but inside was this. And inside this, there's a little sign on here saying, "In the Heart, Haworth, Mrs. Baton's Sweet Shop." And inside here, ladies and gentlemen, licorice bootlaces. Somebody very kindly has sent me some licorice bootlaces as yet ungobbled. But who sent these? That's what I'd like to know. Because there's no note. So I will wait until the Vogue show this evening to see if somebody will own up, because I don't know who it is. So there we go. Anyway, back to the day in question. So up until I had a route around and decided we weren't going to read the continuation. I had a couple of emails from people and messages on Facebook saying, "Richard, you know, really, you're doing a good job, but can you ditch the book you're reading?" And that was really the opinion I was going for. And I think we all sort of came to the conclusion that either this book was not proofread, not edited, or in the haste of war just somehow got published without in the state that it was by ignorance. I don't know. Perhaps the person editing and proofreading it was living through the bombs of the Blitz and just couldn't concentrate. Who knows? Anyway, in the end, it turns out that it's pretty unreadable. Ooh, no, me sending sweeties. I mean, if anybody wants to send me sweeties, by the way, you're very, very welcome. I do like licorice, and thank you very much. So I rooted around on the bookshelves, and I came up with one book, which up until 10 minutes ago, I was all set to read. Did the book end up in the essay? It bloody ought to, shouldn't it? It's actually just on my shelf at the back here. Anyway, I came up with this book, which is one of my favourite novels, but it's a novel, sort of breaks the mould of what we've been doing, and also it's sitting on the Bald Explorer, exploring being the thing. It doesn't really do what it does. And I've mentioned it in the Vogue show. I forget what I do some days. Can you read the last page? I read the last line. I did read the last line yesterday. Anyway, this book's called London Belongs to Me by Norman Collins. It's quite a thick book. It's hilarious in places, but it's a saga. It's one of those sagas. Not a lot happens, but a lot happens, if you see what I mean. Anyway, I was going to read that. And then 10 minutes ago, I kept thinking, well, is it the right sort of... But people were making suggestions. Jerome K. Jerome's 3 Men in a Boat, which I do have somewhere, but I couldn't find it, was on offer. Hilaire Belloc's The 4 Men was another one. I have started to read that, but I couldn't get into the style of that. He's got these 4 men and it's written in a weird style, and I knew I would just not enjoy reading that to you. So that went by the wayside. There was a couple of others, but I haven't got them. I did look at Arkenfield, but it's very broken up, Arkenfield, into narratives from different people and all the rest of it. And I also thought, let's keep away from bloody farming for a bit, seeing as we've just had quite a bad bit of farming from Mr. Williamson. And so we shouldn't be hard on the other book. Mr. Marjorie Banks and Diddyco's will live in my mind forever, says Morton. Yes, there were some good moments, absolutely. And if it had been edited, it would have been funny. So that's good. So I've picked out, just 10 minutes ago, before the show, I've picked out another HV Morton. In fact, his very first one. which will mirror what we've read before with I Saw Two Englands, and this is his first one, In Search of England. And it sort of sticks to the travelling theme of The Bald Explorer, whereas my novel, not my novel, but the novel that I would like to read, there's just that air of consciousness that says it's not... I love it. It's a fantastic book. It takes a bit of time to get going, and then it's a load of old nonsense, really. But but heritage, landscape, and nature, it doesn't really fit. So, In Search of England, we'll give this. It's not too long. We give this a whirl. Hopefully, we know that HV Morton is quite entertaining, and he did allow for some comedy voices. You can always start a new theme. Books for the bonfire. Yeah, thanks, Sean. I could. We don't want to get into burning books. There's a lot of that threatened already at the moment, particularly with history books. So I don't want to encourage that. I don't think that's a very good thing at all. So without further ado, let's try this. We had a bash with. Oh look, this is one of my old photo cards for the Richard Vobes radio show, which came around in 2005. When podcasting came to Britain for the very first time, and I was one of the first four podcasters in Britain for my sins. Nobody ever really cares about that, but award-winning, actually. Thank you for caring about what to read. So, Cynthia, well, I also want it to work for the theme and sit here and just read, obviously, to myself. I can do that. Where is HV Morton's status? It needs pulling down for that book. I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean by that? So anyway, this is, I don't know whether this is his first novel, but it's certainly a jolly one. Well, at least I hope it's a jolly one. So chapter 1, here we go. I go in search of England, describe how I describe... This is the old books. Do you remember the old books? They used to give you a précis of the chapter above the old books. And they also, some of the old books would have, in which I do such and such and such and such, which I've always loved. And on my Bald Explorer videos, I've started, as you may have seen, in many of them, not the last one or two, but in many of them, the Quest for Englands have in which I blah, blah, blah. Because it's heritage. It's a callback, and that's what this channel is about. I mean Henry Williamson. Oh, right, yes, exactly. Where is my Henry Williamson statue? It needs pulling down, absolutely. Linda Kane, afternoon. Hope you're all well. Hello, Linda Kane. Is this your responsibility? Somebody has sent me bootlaces in the post. I don't mean material ones, licorice ones. Somebody very kind. No note though. I don't know who to thank, so I can't eat them until I know who to thank, and they look delicious. Anyway, so we are doing this book, which is I'll hold up there for a thumbnail, which I will snip out. How many minutes in are we? 8:40. Right. Okay. Just remember that, and I can find it a bit better. Right, okay, so we're going to do In Search of England, HV Morton's thing. We'll get through this one, and then in that time we can have better suggestions for the next one. So I go in search of England, describe how I leave the place where London ends and meet a bowl turner, stand beneath a gallows on a hill, enter Winchester except for a wanderer's dole at St. Cross, and end quite properly with a maiden in distress. So there we are. Right, here we go. This is a smaller text than I'm used to, so that's a bit of a pain. I believed that I was dying in Palestine. There was no woman to convince me that the pain in my neck was not the first sign of spinal meningitis, so that, growing rapidly worse, I began to attend my own funeral every day. My appetite, however, remained excellent. In the black depths of misery, I climbed a hill overlooking Jerusalem, unaffected by the fact that this has been considered the best places of all to die, and turning as accurately as I could in the direction of England, I gave way to a wave of homesickness that almost shames me now when I recollect it. And I find it impossible in cold blood and at this distance to put into words the longing that shook me. I have forgotten the pain in the neck, but I will never forget the pain in my heart. As I look out over the inhospitable mountains, I remembered home in a way which, given any other frame of mind, would have astonished me. I solemnly cursed every moment that I had spent wandering foolishly about the world, and I swore that if ever I saw Dover cliffs again, I would never leave them. I had by this time made myself too ill to realise that it is this rare stay-at-home sanity which justifies travel. Perhaps in instinctive contrast to the cold, unhappy mountains of Palestine, there rose up in my mind a picture of a village street at dusk, with a smell of smoke lying in the still air, and here and there little red blinds shining in the dusk under the thatch. I remember how the church bells ring at home, and how, at that time of year, the sun leaves a dull red bar low down in the west, and against it the elms grow blacker minute by minute. Then the bats start to flicker like little bits of burnt paper, and you hear the slow jingle of a team coming home from the fields. When you think like this, sitting alone in a foreign country, you know all there is to learn about heartache. But it does seem strange that a townsman should, in his extremity, see this picture. Would it not be more reasonable to expect him to see his own city? Why did I not start thinking of St. Paul's Cathedral or Piccadilly? I have learnt that since this vision of mine is a common one to exiles all over the world, we think of home, we long for home, but we see something greater. We see England. This village that symbolises England sleeps in the subconsciousness of many a townsman. A little London factory hand who I met during the war confessed to me, when pressed, and after a great mental difficulty, that he visualised the England he was fighting for, the England of England Wants You poster, as not London, not his own street, but as Epping Forest, the green place where he spent bank holidays. And I think most of us did. The village and the English countryside are the germs of all we are and all we have become. Our manufacturing cities belong to the last century and a half. Our villages stand with their roots in the heptarchy. I don't know what that word is. Heptarchy. Maybe someone can tell me. Heptarchy. It's like, well, I don't know what it's like. I was humiliated, mourning there above Jerusalem, to realise how little I knew about England. I was ashamed to think that I had wandered so far and so often over the world, neglecting those lovely things near at home, feeling that England would always be there whenever I wanted to see her. And at that moment, now how far away she seemed, how unattainable, I took a vow that if the pain in my neck did not end for ever on a windy hill in Palestine, I would go home in search of England. I would go through the lanes of England and the little thatched cottages and villages of England, and I would lean over English bridges and lie on English grass and watch an English sky. I opened my window to an April night, and looking down into the London square, saw the new leaves were silver white in the lamplight. Into my room came an earthy smell and the freshness of new grass. The top boughs of the trees were etched against the saffron stain of a London sky, but their boles descended into a pool of darkness, silver and remote as the primeval forest. The fretful traffic sped left and right against the railings, and beyond lay that patch of stealthy vitality older than London. What amazing thing it is the coming of spring to London. The very pavements seem ready to crack and lift under the denied earth. In the air is a consciousness of life which tells you that if traffic stopped for a fortnight, grass would grow again in Piccadilly and corn would spring in the pavement cracks where a horse had spilt his feed. And the squares of London, so dingy and black since the first October gale, fill week by week with the rising tide of life, just as the sea, running up the creeks and pushing itself forward inch by inch towards the land, comes at last to each remote rock pool. The squares of London, those sacred little patches of the countryside preserved, perhaps by the Anglo-Saxon instinct for grass and trees, hold, in their restricted glades, some part of the magic of spring. I suppose many a man has stood at his window above a London square in April, hearing a message from the lanes of England. The Georgians no doubt fancied the Ajapans and the centaurs kicked their hooves, these must be horses I suppose, in Berkeley Square. And I, above my humbler square, dreamt a no less classic eclogue, E-C-L-O-G-U-E, eclogue of hedges lit with hawthorn, of orchards ready for their brief wave of pink spray, of fields in which smoky-laced lambs pressed against their dams, of new furrows over which moved slowly the eternal figure bent above a plough. This, then, is my adventure. Now, I will go with spring before me and the road calling me out into England. It doesn't matter where I go, for it is all England. I will see what lies off the beaten track. I will, as the mood takes me, go into famous towns or unknown hamlets. I will shake up the dust of kings and abbots. I will bring the knights and the cavaliers back to the roads, and once in a while I will hear the thunder of old quarrels at earthwork and church door. If I become weary of dream and legend, I will just sit and watch the ducks on a village pond, or take the horses to water. I will talk with lords and cottagers, tramps, gypsies and dogs. I will, in fact, do anything that comes to my head as suddenly and as light-heartedly as I will accept everything and anything that comes my way, rain or sun, along the road. I like that attitude. It's what I should do with a bold explorer, is just go anywhere and talk to anybody. All good knights, pilgrims and sons in search of fortune seekers after truth, and plain ordinary fools, turn towards the city that they have left and take a farewell according to their natures. This is the full moment in all journeying, the time when girths are tightened in preparation for the miles that lie ahead. Some cities, such as Durham, which stand on a hill, or Salisbury, which, if I remember, lies in a snug hollow, lend themselves to apostrophe, and appear to have been designed by man and nature to encourage the gentle art of valediction. But London is too big. By the time you reach the fringe of her, there is no London to be seen, and you cannot waste sentiment on the suburban gasworks. Of course, no living man has seen London. London has ceased to be visible since Stuart days. It was then possible for the last time in history to stand among the water meadows at Westminster and to see London riding on Ludgate Hill, escorted by her church tower and spires. Plantagenet London must have been best of all Londons for the purpose of a farewell speech, a city behind its wall, something definite to see and to address. Today, even if you were to climb to the dome of St. Paul's, you'd not see London and the city state, but London as a labyrinth. The nearest approach to a real view of London is that from the tower of Southwark Cathedral, or better still, from a boat on the Thames at night, when darkness lends an ancient enchantment to the roof lines. However, a man contemplating a farewell address to London finds that all enthusiasm has evaporated by the time he reaches the place where London ends. Now, London ends at a public house. Outside the public house stood an old man wearing silver side whiskers and a peevish expression, which suggested to me that someone had promised to stand him a drink in '85 and had never turned up. "Hello," I said to him, but he looked the other way and spat rudely. In a line with the public house were new shops. In a field some way off, the high road was scared-looking, pink and white villas, each one possessing a bald garden and a brand-new galvanised dustbin at the back door. Wives, as new as the gardens and the houses, busied about their work and took frequent peeps through the front door windows to make sure that the baby was still on the safe side of the garden fence. The most significant item on the landscape was an empty omnibus, standing in a weary attitude opposite the public house. There were London names on the indicator board, but they seemed as unlikely as the Italian names on a French express at Calais. The history of London is the moving on of that red omnibus another mile along the road. More pink and white houses, more shops, more wives, more babies. "Good morning," I said to the ancient man. "Straight on," he replied. "Good morning," I ventured again. "About 7 miles," he retorted. I felt that we were going to be great friends. "Will you have a drink?" I asked. Even this failed to bring us together, so I went right into his silver side whiskers and shouted, "Beer!" Whereupon he sprang smartly to attention and walked to the bar. By shouting slightly to the right of his left ear, I found myself in touch with a personality not only charming, but also interesting. He asked me where I was going in that little blue motor car. "Oh, anywhere," I told him 4 times. Like so many old men who stand thinking, or just standing, outside public houses, he had been in the Navy, and was therefore fitted by experience to understand my vivid state of mind. "I feel," I told him, "exactly as if I feel when school broke up in July, or when the armistice was signed. No troubles and no duties, nothing to do but go on and on, to stop and talk whenever I feel, to loiter when the mood takes me, and to hurry up when I do." I told him that all the towns and villages in England were before me, and he confided to me that he had a brother who had once upon a time lived in Bolton. We were just warming up to one another when a tremendous throbbing arose outside. The engine of the omnibus had started. I went to the door. It was a moment for which I had been waiting. The conductor flung away his cigarette, the driver climbed up into his seat, the old woman in black sat inside, a young man in a belted mackintosh climbed aloft, the driver put in the clutch, and the last red link with London started off down the road. "Goodbye, London." That was all I said. There comes a moment in all travel when you know that you have really started. It may be weeks before you start, or weeks before you have started. It is spiritual emotion, a turning towards the future with an eager heart. And this is how I felt when the last omnibus went back to London, leaving me alone at the place where London ends. I started the engine. I felt that I had seen the last of London. "Goodbye," I said to the old man. He wiped his mouth and looked the other way. I don't think he heard me. I sped on to the green tunnel of a lane, with England before me, and the keen air was like wine to me, and the green of the young leaves was like music. The river looked delicious at Datchet. Eton was slumbering, elms in well-bred reticence. 2 scarlet sentries marched up and down the steep slopes before the entrance to Windsor Castle. 2 pretty girls stood with a white Sealyham pup not heard of a Sealyham pup, at the beginning of Reading, and on I went, on into the green Berkshire, till I came to a little lane with a bend in the middle that seemed to say, "I dare you." "That looks good," I said. The cart tracks were full of water, and the lane led up a hill, and the earth of this lane was the colour of amber. At the top of the lane was Bucklebury Common, aflame with gorse. Tall trees stood up from this gorse, making lovely green patterns against a windy sky. How are we doing? Oh, Canada, I wonder if the First Nations will be celebrating. Bolton. Not Lob. Is that what Bolton is backwards? Thanks. As I was trying to decide which lane had the best turning, there came towards me over the wet sandy road a scholarly-looking middle-aged man. I hailed him. Sorry, I didn't realise I was quite so prominent in the frame. A bit over huge. I hailed him, as I tend to hail everybody, and we fell into conversation. He was, I observed, carrying a wooden bowl. "Perhaps you know these lanes?" I said. "I seem to be lost, but before I find my way out, is there anything worth seeing here?" "Well," he replied, holding up his wooden bowl, "what do you think of that?" I looked at it curiously, unwilling to admit that I had seen nothing remarkable about it. His bowl had a marvellous grain, a fine smooth finish, and 2 neat lines around the outer rim. "That," he said, "is the work of the last bowl turner in England. He lives over the hill at Bucklebury. A most interesting survival, quite remarkable. You ought to look at his workshop, for you'll never see another one like it." I had a suspicion when I first saw him fondling the bowl that this stranger was an antiquity. Not an antiquity, an antiquary. And when he proceeded to deliver a lecture on Treen, standing there with his feet in a puddle, I knew it for certain. "Before people used pewter plates for tankards," he explained, "wooden trenchers, drinking cups and bowls are called treens. They were used by everyone. I hope I'm not boring you. Well, in Elizabethan times, pewter came into fashion, and wooden things were usually only by poorer people. Then came china and glass. They knocked out pewter, and the demand for treen dwindled to almost nothing, but the art of making it never quite dried out. Now there is only one maker of treen left, and he turns bowls exactly as they did in the days of Alfred the Great." A sharp shower of rain interrupted him, and he went on his way, and I in search of the last treen man. The gorse flung itself in a sheet of flame across Bucklebury Common, and the birds were singing like mad in the rain. How often in London rain weighs heavy on the spirit and soaks itself into the very soul. But here, in the country, it seldom saddens you. In fact, there's a kind of country rain that exhilarates and causes you to sing aloud. I would not care to be the postman at Bucklebury. The cottages hide from one another. The hamlet is spread generously over little hillocks, so that a man in a motor car has a fair chance of finding himself in Stanford Dingley, or Yattendon, or Frilsham, or even Beanham, before he discovers his object in this gorsy labyrinth. And why not? These names have quality. These lanes are so friendly. I was thinking more or less this way, half deciding to take the road to Yattendon and to give up on the quest for the treen maker, when I came to a tumble-down hut on a green knoll. Enormous elm logs stood piled outside the door. Inside, a man was sharpening a long knife with a whetstone. He glanced up and admitted that his name was William Lely. He looked at me a little shy, middle-aged fawn. His cheeks were red, and his healthy country face was shaded by a floppy green hat. he asked me in, and went on sharpening his knife, his back to me, an attitude which delighted me because it was, from him, so sincere. His knife meant more to him than I did, and he was, as I looked at his hands, a craftsman. No, there wasn't much to see next door where he worked, but he'd show me. Yes, he'd loved making bowls better than anything. He'd never been happier when he was holding a bit of elm to lathe. His father had taught him how to make treen, and his grandfather taught his father, and so it went back goodness knows when. Talking like this, he opened the door to the workshop. To say that 800 years seemed to have stopped at the door conveys nothing. The room was an Anglo-Saxon workshop. Probably the same sort of shed existed in ancient Egypt. It seemed at first sight that Heath Robinson had fitted it up with all manner of pulleys and strings. The floor was deep in soft elm shavings, and across the hut was bent a young alder sapling connected to a primitive lathe by a leather thong. "No other kind of lathe will do," replied William Lely, stepping into the wickerwork pen. "The sapling takes off the strain. You watch. I'm going to turn an elm bowl." He picked up a chunk of wood and, putting it onto the lathe, worked a foot pedal and held a sharp, bent knife to the rapidly revolving wood. With surprising speed, he cut the outer shape of the bowl. Then, taking a different knife, he cut out the inside as you might cut out the inside of a turnip. The bowl was roughly finished. "It wants titivating up, of course," he explained, and the inside will make another smaller bowl." The alder sapling sprang back, vibrating. A clumsy, primitive, marvellously efficient invention, and in it, and many more now lost to us, the secret of those beautiful handicrafts of antiquity which remain to astonish us and to confound our modern machinists. Boys won't learn work like this now," he said. "It's not as easy as it looks, and unless you learn when you're a lad, you'll never catch the knack of it." He uncovered a pile of beautifully turned bowls of all sizes in the corner of the hut. I saw what the man in the lane was so proud of. Each bowl had the individuality which only a man's hands can give to an object. "You could make a lot of money if you wanted to," I told him. "Money?" he said with a slow, fawn-like smile. "Money's only storing up trouble, I think. I like making bowls better than I like making money." "Will you say that again?" He leaned against the door of the hut, his homely brown shade shaded by the green floppy hat, and he said it again, slightly puzzled and feeling, I think, that I was in some way getting at him. But you will have guessed that I wished to hear for a second time the voice of the craftsman, the lover of his job, the proud creator of beautiful common things, a voice that is now smothered by the scream of machines. I went down the green hill, feeling that my search of England had started well. What's treen? Treen is, I think, these bowls that he was talking about. Newbury, in Berkshire, where the children, I am told, still place flowers on the mounds where Cavaliers and Roundheads sleep together as they fell in the Civil War, is, like all towns which have any traffic with racehorses, a knowing-looking, bandy-legged town. It is the twin of Newmarket. Both seem to have their fingers laid against their noses, one eye shut and the other on the stable door. I went into the old cloth hall, which is now a museum, and looked at the Egyptian antiquities presented by the late Earl of Carnarvon, whose body lies nearby on the bare chalk summit of Beacon Hill, the most lonely grave in all of England. Mr. Suggett is ringing me. Shall we answer the call and embarrass him? Oh, Mr. Suggett, how the devil are you? Yes, very good, thank you. Say hello to my lovely viewers.
Oh, of course, sorry, you're, oh, yeah. Hello, viewers, I've done it again.
In half an hour, I will be finishing. Shall I ring you back?
Yes, please, that'd be great.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's always good fun. He should know better. Bless his little socks. Anyway, where were we? Yes. What was it? The something. Oh yes, here we go. The loneliest grave in all of England. Late in the afternoon, I set off to cross the high chalk downs into Hampshire with a vague idea of reaching Winchester by bedtime. You gather that I'm no racing motorist. Several side roads got in the way, so that in no time I found myself lost in a tangle of up and down lanes which connect village to village. When taking my bearings, I saw on the summit of the highest down an object which I took to be a flagstaff. But why a flagstaff on a bald head of a hill? That's the second time he's made allusion to bald heads, the swine. I took out binoculars and saw a gallows standing up there, a mark for several countries, firm and unmistakable, as if ready for a hanging. A gibbet. Before climbing the steep road, I thought that I would ask a few questions. I stopped a labourer on a bicycle. "What is that on the hill?" "Gallows," he said suspiciously. "Who was hanged there?" "Dunno." "When was it last used?" "Dunno." "Have you ever heard any story about it?" "No." I discovered that he had been born and bred in the shadow of Inkpen Beacon, which is the name of this hill. The next man was just as negative. So was the third. Dusk was falling. I thought that I would waste no more time. The road climbed round and round. To the right lay a misty panorama of distant green fields, dark clumps of trees, tiny white roads like threads intersecting them, the whole view shut in by low sailing dark clouds. I left the car at the end of the road and struck over the grassland. Soon the top of the gallows showed itself, outlined against the pale sky as I advanced, and in a few moments I was standing on a high mound. Before me was a great dip in which 1,000 feet below lay Hampshire like a green table. No gallows I have ever read has been complete without wind whistling through it. Coombe Gallows lives up to the tradition. The wind tore through it, screamed past it, so that I had to hold on to it. It reverberated slightly in the wind. It was eerie standing up there, so near the slow-moving clouds, with dark falling and no one near, only the low branches bent forward in the wind and a few drops of falling rain. What grim crime was commemorated by this old cross? I noticed that the wood was not of one date. The gallows had been repaired in recent times. That struck me as curious. A white paper fluttered in the wind from our nails. A white paper fluttered in the wind from 4 nails. Suppose this told the story of the crime. I read with difficulty, for it was almost dark, the following words. Teas can be obtained at Coombe. That sent the skeleton back to the bushes. I laughed and went back along the grass to the car. Now this is the story of Coombe Gallows, unravelled later by Winchester Library. On the 7th of March 1676, a man and a woman were hanged on this gibbet, and their bodies exposed to a warning to all sinners. Their names were George Broman and Dorothy Newman. Not Broman, Browman. And they were hanged for the brutal murder of 2 children, which the woman had by a former husband. The children's bodies were discovered in the little hill pond near the gallows. This pond was in Inkpen parish, but the authorities reputed it and refused either to arrest or to go to the expense of punishing the murderers. The parish of Coombe, in which the man and woman lived, took the case into its own hands, drew a new parish boundary to include the scene of the crime, 25 acres and a pond, erected the gibbet, and exposed there the bodies of the murderers. The strange part of the story is the gallows owes its existence to a clause in the lease of Eastwich Farm at the foot of the hill. The tenants of this farm have for 250 years been obliged to keep the gallows in repair. The present gibbet is the third erected on the site, and I am told that a charity in Coombe owes its existence to the upkeep of the gallows. If the gallows disappears, so does the charity. A rather different version of this tragedy is given by W.H. Hudson in Afoot in England. So, Coombe Gallows, let's just have a look. I'm curious now. This was, I can't remember, this is a 1920s, this book, by the way. So let's have a quick look. Is the gallows still there? Exactly, that's what I want to know. Coombe Gallows. Coombe Gallows, Gibbet Gallows, Wikipedia. Oh. And I think there is a picture to follow. Coombe Gallows is a gibbet on the top of Gallows Down near the village of Coombe, I suppose, just within the civil parish of Coombe in Berkshire. There is some form of gallows. Hang on, let's. There we go. That's what it looks like. This little picture here. The gibbet is located at grid reference blah 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 on the Test Way, close to the Berkshire-Hampshire border. It's named after the village of Coombe. It's also close to Inkpen. It was erected in 1676 for the purpose of the bodies of George Broomham and he called them Broomham and Dorothy Newman, and has only ever been used for them. The gibbet was placed in such a prominent position as a warning to deter from others from committing crimes. Broomham and Newman were having an affair, and they were hanged for the murder of Broomham's wife, Martha, and their son, Robert, after they discovered them together on the Downs. Hello, he said children. Unfortunately for the lovers, the murder was witnessed by Mad Thomas, who managed to convey what he saw to the authorities. A replica gibbet marks the site. The original one was destroyed many years ago, and subsequent replicas have been replaced several times. Nothing about the charity that was there. So there you go. That's quite interesting, isn't it? How rather jolly. If a hanging is a jolly thing. How are we doing on the time? I must tell you that I dipped into Winchester at 8 o'clock and they were ringing the curfew from the Guildhall. A bell has been ringing for 860 years. Such a snug, friendly old town. A town full of bells, for it was practice night at the cathedral. By bedtime a hush had fallen over Winchester, and I put my head out of the window in the hope of seeing King Alfred's ghost riding down the street. But it was raining, and the street was empty. No place to hang around, says young Michael Angel. Gallows Corner on the A127, east of Romford. Oh. I have been there, says Trev's Travels. Have you? Not much wrong with the gibbet, is there? No. 1927 it was published. Thank you very much. I knew it was in the 20s. Richard, watching in Brighton with my mother-in-law John. Hello, Ernie, and hello to your mother-in-law. Sorry, your father-in-law even. John. Gibbet is still there, apparently. Fantastic. Ruth Ellis was the last woman to be hanged. That's true. I have actually done a podcast about Ruth Ellis and visited the pub. What's the name of the pub? Where the shooting of her lover, what's his name, took place, and that she did it. And I have photographed the bullet holes in, can't remember the name of the place. It was there. I did that about 20 years ago. Ruth Ellis murder. Fascinating. And I can't remember what else I was going to say about that. There was something else. I also thought that Mr. Angel, not much wrong with the gibbet there. I also thought that Mr. Angel. Oh, Mr. A, yes, of course. String 'em up, that's what I say, says Morris. Thanks a lot, Dan. Right, how are we doing? We've 15 minutes. Shall we do a bit more? We're on a bit of a roll. Let's do a little bit more. Oh, here's a picture of an old building in Winchester in the book. Nice old... I think that's part of the... not the town hall. The... Oh, it says the church at St. Cross. Oh, yes, the church at St. Cross. Oh, and at the beginning, there's this picture. You know, he goes down a lane. 1927. This is what the lanes look like in England. Not much wrong with that, I have, you know. Could we have some more lanes like that, please? The rain ceased in the night, and awakening early, as one does in a strange room, I saw a brightness behind the blind that told me the sun was shining. Winchester was not yet awake. It was that lovely time in early spring when the world, it seems, is swept and garnished for a festival. As I walked through the empty streets, I wondered when the citizens of Winchester, now snuggling down into that last self-indulgent half-hour of bed, would realise their folly and, opening the doors, come tumbling out to go a-maying. A thrush was singing in the cathedral limes, and the sun, still low in the east, played early morning tricks in the streets, gilding unexpected places, easting improbable shadows. It was mellow over that old school which had sent so many men clearly labelled into the world. You can generally tell them at a glance, especially in the law courts, when they rise for the prosecution and, with a kind of cold pleasure, stab the rhetoric of the defence with an intellectual instrument forged at Winchester. Then there's some Latin, which I'm not even going to attempt to read. Someone who knew Winchester, it may have been Wren, carved that on the wall of the school in 1683. Aut disci manet sos terra cadii. Dunno. I went on thinking that if one were looking for the germ of the British Empire, it is to be found in this quiet little city of Winchester. The princes of this city emerged as the kings of Wessex, and after a long war with the Danes, and later became the kings of England, it was the royal city of Winchester, which was truly the very heart of England, until Westminster Hall and the Abbey gathered round them in the royal city of a new England. That's right, because Winchester was the capital of England for a short while, before London, wasn't it? And sitting on a sunny wall, I tried to look back into time when many poor swineherd raked the embers of the fire over a Roman pavement. The fern of the elder tree was pushing asunder under the walls of London, and I wondered how many strange tales of ghosts in the old dead city on the hill were whispered beyond the walls at night. Did any man prowling those empty streets by day rest awhile upon the statue of a fallen Caesar, and hold in the hand a statue of Christ and Isis, and wonder what they were? Such a mist it is into which a man looks from the wall of Winchester. The era of the Celt, Saxon and Dane is like Macbeth's battle on the blasted heath, says Mr. G. M. Trevelyan in his History of England. Prophecy hovers around. Horn. I've got Mr. Trevelyan's, GM Trevelyan's History of England, by the way. I wasn't going to read that one. That is actually quite interesting. Prophecy hovers around, horns are heard blowing in the mist, and a confused uproar of savage tumult and outrage. Is this more quotes from him? I think it is. We catch glimpses of giant figures, mostly warriors at strife, but there are ploughmen too, it seems, breaking the primeval clod, and we hear the sound of forests crashing to the axe. Around all is the lap of the waves and the city of seamen beaching their ships. Surely there was also, as the prophetic mist blows aside, a glimpse of men walking the old Roman roads of England bearing a cross, the legions returning with shaven heads. Another bold reference there. Surely the most important sound in the mist was the sound of chanting. Surely the most gigantic figure, greater than Guthrum, and his shield and sword, was the holy man under an oak tree, talking to a bearded king about something strange and wonderful that happened a long time ago in Bethlehem. I think so. For Rome conquered England twice, once with a sword and once with a story. And as horns blew in the mist and warriors roared together at the palisades, the monasteries locked their doors on all that was left of civilization and fled with their relics, still along the roads of Rome, conscious that they guarded the little flame of the new world. And it seems, as we look into this mist, that these men of Rome, from Wales, from Ireland, ran through England, over the wild heathland, through a dark forest, carrying their good news in the half-light, as boys run laughing through the streets of a city in the first hour of the new year. It's interesting he says that Rome conquered us twice, because I suppose that's true. They conquered us, and the Romans came to England, and then they brought the Christianity, the Roman version of it. The cathedral bell began to ring, and the birds were singing in the trees. I went to see the great hall of the castle of Winchester, all now left of the royal palace that stood on the traditional castle of King. I'll read that again because that was not correct. I went to see the great hall of the castle of Winchester, all now left of the royal palace, stood on the traditional castle of King Arthur. How the prestige of Winchester endured when Henry VII wished to strengthen his hereditary, sorry, because it was broken up, his hereditary claim to the throne in 1486, he could think of nothing better to this purpose than to bring his queen to Winchester in order that the heir to the throne might be born in the castle of King Arthur. I expected to see Norman work, but it's early English, aisles, dormer windows, high, slim pillars of Purbeck marble. In Winchester Great Hall, and in how many other halls, castles, abbeys, earthworks and monasteries throughout England, the imagination halts before the richness of their associations. If I were the curator of a hall, of an abbey or a castle, I would be driven to madness by my anxiety to make people see part of the building that played the long pageantry of history. The round table of King Arthur has hung for over 500 years on the walls of Winchester Hall. It's first mentioned by John Harding in 1378. The round table of Winchester become, and it is ended, and there it hangeth yet. I think it's not the real round table at all, is it? I've seen the table hanging there, the supposed table. I just think it's just a round table. It's a bit of a hoax, isn't it? Henry VIII brought the Emperor Charles V when he was visiting England in 1522 to see this table, which he exhibited as one of the most interesting sights in the kingdom. It cannot, of course, be the round table of legend, but it is a most fascinating piece of carpentry. Oh, there we go. It was repainted in Tudor times, and it shows King Arthur sitting crowned in Tudor robes. A point in favour of the legend is that it is quite large enough to sit the king and 24 of his knights. And I'm going to pause there. I hope you're enjoying it. It's a bit more like the other one. I saw Two Englands, but no, it's medieval, not from the Dark Ages. There we go. More listening today. Good sign for the book. Thank you very much, Linda. Gruesome Dan, just looking at these. It's now a picnicking site. What, the Coombe Hill? Not sure, though. Not been back for 40 years, says Mark Donny MacLeod. That's the part of the college building, Richard, was used for Evensong. Oh, wait a minute. We're getting confused where we are. Many alumni were rulers and members of Parliament. The table was made by much later King Edward II, I believe, who had it made. Excellent. Well, I hope you're enjoying it. We'll be back again tomorrow at the same time. Enjoyed this reading. It was it wasn't lovely. And wasn't it lovely to hear from Richard S? Oh, yes, you reminded me to give him a ring. I will have to give him a tinkle. Thank you so much. I will do that as I light the fire. I have some dough rising in the kitchen, hopefully rising in the kitchen, to make some more bread. So that's nice. Seems to be a rush on yeast at the moment. I went in last week to Morrison's and they had no yeast. This week they still had no yeast, but they had some sachets of 7 grams. So I've bought those, hopefully. Cracking return to form, Mr. Vobes. The Morton fella can actually write. Yes, there we are. A man after your own name, in fact. So there we go. All right. Well, we'll crack on with that because it rolls off the tongue quite nicely, and then we can have a consensus of the next book later on. Thank you very much. And take care, one and all. I will speak to you later. Oh, and by the way, the Vogue show is on tonight. And if anybody knows who sent me in this licorice, then do let me know. Because I don't know who sent it, see? Anyway, take care. Nice to see you all. Look after yourself. And arrivederci. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.